In 2017, Shelley Simmons in Newport News, her race was a tie. In Arizona in 2018, we talked about this all the time. She lost because they drew her opponent's name out of the hat.
That's insane. That is insane.
You don't have to be supporting a certain candidate, putting it in your sermons, but it's okay to hold a voter drive after church or before church to get people registered to vote.
So it's not even like one vote was what decided for the Republicans to be in control in Virginia, which is crazy to think about. I use that story a lot of times with folks, but I think at the end of the day, I tell people, not voting is a decision.
There were a lot of people that, use the excuse of, well, I don't like either candidate. But now we see what's happening because you didn't vote. You know what I mean? And so that's what I would have to say. Look at the state of our country now. Just because you're not voting doesn't mean you're not affected by everything that our president is doing.
Good morning and welcome to Civic Pulse, Politics and Everyday Life. And today I am so excited to have all of our special guests, and we are going to be talking about voter apathy. Why are people not voting? I don't understand it. Let's start with Roanoke City. The last primary that we had for our state election, we only had about 4,000, almost 5,000 voters turn out, when we have 60,000 plus registered. That is a problem. So let's dive into it. First, I want all my guests to introduce themselves. Javion, I'll call on you and introduce yourself to our listeners and our viewers.
Hello, everyone. I am Javion Tucker. I am a third-year political science scholar at Norfolk State University.
Thank you, Javion. Lena?
Hello, I am Lena Bryan. I am a third-year political science scholar from Norfolk State University as well, and I'm from Manassas, Virginia.
Welcome. Emily Kate, better known as EK.
I'm Emily K. Copenhaver, or EK. I've been working on campaigns since Hillary's race in 2016 and grew up in Grayson County, but went to high school in Roanoke.
And what are you doing right now, Emily Kate?
Oh, I'm working for a couple of different House of Delegate candidates as a consultant.
Good. And one of our House of Delegate candidates, Lily Franklin, thank you for taking the time off the campaign trail to join us, Lily.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you again, Trish. Lily Franklin, candidate for House Delegates, House District 41 here in Southwest Virginia. Last cycle, Trish and I were out on the trails together, and I'm excited to be back with you this morning.
Thank you. And we're pulling for you here on Civic Pulse. We really want you to pull it off this time. We were so close last time, so go Lily. And we're going to just dive right in. Like I said, thank you guys for joining in. So here we are. What is the most common reason people in our area give for not voting? Anybody want to tackle that? What's the reason people are saying they're not voting?
Well, I can go ahead and jump on that question. I feel as though the reason why a lot of people say they don't vote is because they feel as though their vote doesn't matter. They feel as though no change is being made. I know that when I was phone banking for some candidates running for some positions, a lot of the responses I would get, or one response in particular, was that nothing ever changes. So why? Or I don't like either candidate, so I'm just not going to vote at all. And that's kind of what you get very frequently, is that, people feel like their voices are not being heard, or people just don't know the candidates, or people just don't like the candidates. And I feel like those are all very big reasons for people not voting.
Thank you for that, Lena. Anybody else want to chime in on that? I think those are valid points, Lena, and we're going to dive deep into that.
Going back to your point with the primaries, people don't usually know that we have, number one, that we have elections every year in Virginia. Virginia is one of those states that we have elections every year. And they also don't know that we sometimes, not all the time, have two elections every year between the primary and also the general election.
Yeah, I think that's what we call voter burnout. We all know about that. Anything you want to add, Emily, Kate, or Lily, to that question? Why, or what are people saying? What's their excuse? Well, I'm not going to say excuse. What their reason?
Yeah, I thought the same thing as Lena coming in. I was like, it's because nothing ever changes. People say the person I vote for, it's great, I cast my vote, but then nothing ever changes. And I think, again, there are a lot of reasons for that. But I also think that candidates sometimes have a hard time messaging to their voters the importance of voting and also what they will do with that vote and how that will impact their lives. I think there's a bit of a communication breakdown between candidate campaigns and voters. But I also know that Lily's been doing a really great job with the poppy policies. So, not a candidate.
No. Well, what are your thoughts on this, Lily?
Yeah, I mean, I hear a lot of what Lena and echo a lot of the other statements that were made earlier. You know, people don't see the change and how we are actually going to help people and why their vote matters. I also have a pretty young district, and so I have Virginia Tech students, and I know a lot of it also is that they aren't sure how they cast a vote, and they're worried about the rules and regulations and worried about getting in trouble too. And so I think there's part of it is voter education, and then some of it is actually when we get elected delivering for people and reminding them that this is what their vote means.
I certainly agree with that, Lily. Let me ask you this. What impact does low voter turnout have on local government decisions? Because I know you are running for a reason, and these are some of the things that you want to impact. So what are some of the things that you think have an impact when people don't show up to vote?
Yeah, when people don't show up to vote, it impacts everything, and especially at the state and local level. That's where your day-to-day lives are controlled. The state government helps control infrastructure, your school spending, they control public safety, they control your infrastructure and even how your trash is taken out, and so I think everybody looks at Congress being not effective, and there's probably an argument for that to be true. But at the state and local level, we are constantly doing things to improve people's lives or working on the day-to-day things that they actually care about, like the new development down the road or something like that, and how that impacts the water. Those are all things that are local driven and state driven, and those change and are rapidly changing every day.
Does anybody else want to add anything to that? I think it's really important that we try to convey a clear message when we're out campaigning, and I'm sure that you're doing that, Lily. You are certainly doing that. But a lot of times, like Emily Kate said, the candidates do not connect with the voters. So what can they do? What can the candidates do better or do differently to connect with the voters? That's a very good question. Who
I don't
wants
know.
to tackle that?
I was like, I feel like other people should tackle it too. But from my perspective, meeting people where they are at, I think a lot of times folks running for office think that people are available to come to town halls and that they want to come out to your sessions and things, but that's not true. They're working 2 and 3 jobs to make ends meet. So you could have the world's best message, but if you're a mama working 2 jobs and you come home at 10 p.m. every night and don't even get to tuck your kids in at night, why are you listening to me and talk about policies? And so showing up at their doors, knocking and listening to their concerns, I think that's one of the biggest things and when you talk to voters at their door, you really can help drive your messaging and understanding what the struggles are in your district. I think that's probably the top thing for me.
Well, this election coming up we always say every election is an important election. Every election, we all say, oh, this is just such an important election. But I really feel like this election is a very important election. So, Jamie, tell me this. If you were running somebody's campaign, what would you do to try to connect with the voters? And I'll ask the same thing with Lena and certainly Emily Kate, because you all are very active right now on campaigns. Starting with you, Javion. What do you think?
I'm going to say exactly what Lily just said, meeting them where they're at. I know here at Norfolk State, students, they don't leave off this campus as much. And so, and something that we don't really see, I can count on my one hand since I've been here, how many candidates have actually been here. And it haven't, and it's always been for either it was for their campaign, they held a campaign rally here or something, or they had a forum here. But we never really just seen them just walking around campus. I know our Democratic candidate for governor did that. She did that for our homecoming. I actually was just walking around campus and I just seen her walking. And I said, that's how it should always be. Candidates should just be walking and meeting people. And I want to go back to your last question as well on how important it is for us to vote. Last school year, partnering with the NAACP and student affairs, we registered almost 400 people,
Wow.
students here to vote. But there was also a large number of people that went to the polls and did same day voter registration. And I think Lena can testify to this part because she was in SGA. After the election, we had a big district city council race here, and there was like 7 candidates running. And the chief of elections of Norfolk called the school and said, we can't call this election because of the same day voter registration. And there was a couple of errors on a couple of the ballots, and they needed to contact the students to get some more information. And she said, but stress to the students that they need to call us back because we cannot call this election until we've reached out and verified these ballots. And I think she gave it about a week until she was able to call the election. But that's just how important it is and how college students are playing a role in these elections.
So, Lena, do you think college students or young adults are more engaged now than they ever have been, or is there something that we can do differently to engage more?
I feel like as far as engagement goes, between adults that are out in the real world versus kind of like students, I just think also the same way that single mothers may have 3 jobs and might be doing a lot and they're worried about what they have going on in their personal lives, I feel like it's the same way with students. And unless you go in and purposely insert yourselves in their lives and kind of infiltrate yourself in their everyday, they're not going to look at you. They're not going to think about you. They're going to be more worried about their classes, and in their free time, they're going to be looking at like more social media, and they're not really going to be engaged with what's going on. And so I echo a lot of what Javion said. It's also not just about putting yourselves in spaces where there are students and where there are voters, like college campuses and going to neighborhoods and knocking on doors, but it's also about building relationships, because when you have relationships with people, they're more inclined to vote for you and actually follow what you're doing. There are some candidates, some senators that I met, some delegates that I met that I would go so hard behind. And if they were to ever run for anything, I would be right there because we have that relationship.
You have
And I
relations.
actually do feel as though I am cared about by them. And
Yeah.
so the same way that like you wouldn't care as much if you didn't know them personally. Even just feeling like you know them a little bit gives you enough to want to go out and root behind them.
Makes it important. So, yeah, I saw you nodding, Emily Kate, on that. So let me ask you this. Do you think it's voter disengagement or apathy, or do you think there is some voter suppression? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a bunch of everything. Virginia is a state where we still have Jim Crow laws on the books when it comes to voting. And so voter access is very hard. I was watching the ballot count during the mayoral race in 2024 in Roanoke City. And we had a lot of folks who followed the poll workers' instructions, but they filled out a wrong form or something happened and they weren't able to get their ballot counted because of just a clerical error. And so those are things that campaigns can kind of preempt and get ahead of. Doing like good ballot cure plans ahead of time will help get these, not necessarily stragglers, but folks who are coming in maybe as a first-time voter or a first-time voter where they are. I know in Arizona, one of our strategies was to register people for a permanent early voting, the permanent early voter list. And it's very similar to what we had in Virginia with permanent absentee. They can sign up to get a ballot mailed to their door. I know in rural places, this is incredibly, incredibly important as we have limited access to mobility. And I think being able to put your ballot in the mail, fill it out, and just send it right back, it's a great option for voting, and it cuts down on some of this like same-day registration issues. So I think getting out ahead of it, doing some electorate expansion, especially now in the summer. But I know like when kids are coming back to school, that's a great time. I really like to emphasize college students voting where their college is. A lot of times, like especially in Southwest Virginia, your vote here means a lot more than it means if you're from a state like New York, if you're from California. Your vote here means a lot more, and that happens every year. And the votes that you're taking are impacting, like if you're going to be at college for the next 4 years, you get to vote twice for a delegate. So you're going to be able to see the impacts of these votes, and it's very important to vote where your college is. But that does take a lot of extra work on the campaign's end to make sure everyone is registered, make sure they have their correct address. And to Javion's point, make sure that we can get a hold of them if anything happens with their ballot.
Well, Yeah, you have a lot packed into that, but I want to go back to one thing about your vote being really important here in Southwest Virginia, because this is not applicable to Manassas or even Tidewater, Jadion out there at Norfolk State, but here in Southwest Virginia, and Lily, I know you can attest to this, we feel so forgotten, and we work the hardest to make our voices heard. So what else can be done, Lily? What do you think that we could do to increase this voter turnout locally? Because it was bad. It was terrible. Now, it wasn't just in Roanoke. It was across the state, but really bad here in Roanoke. I mean, 4,500 votes. That is unreal.
Yeah, I think that there's probably a lot that can be done to increase turnout. I think the biggest thing that both you and I had happen to us last year is that there was no investment from state party leadership. And that's half of the battle, is that we have to change the conversation. And I think since the last election, and we were both so close, the party has seen that there are winnable seats and we should be fighting in all regions of the state. And so this year, the first coordinated campaign, which you're going to freak out, is actually in Blacksburg.
Yeah, rich that.
I know, it's crazy. The first one in Virginia is in Southwest Virginia, which is exciting, and it shows us shifting and that people understand that we can win in other places. And you know just as much as I know that people down here, they aren't talked to as much. They don't feel like their vote matters, even maybe more than some other places. And so the first thing we can do is make sure they know there's an election happening and that someone is fighting for their vote. And that takes money and time. So.
Yes, we need money. That is so key. That's part of the problem here in Southwest Virginia. The caucus, I understand that they want to make sure that they get all of the seats that they can possibly get. And I know that it's easier to try to retain those seats in Northern Virginia, where it's heavily Democratic, and also in Tidewater. But I don't think that a lot of people understand it's not so much getting a delegate or getting the number of seats that you want in the House and in the Senate, but it's also important for us to have representation out here in Southwest Virginia. That's what I always campaigned on. It's like, look, it's not fair that we don't have representation. Yes, you got all the Senate seats you need, and yes, you have all the delegate seats you need, and that was your focus. But what about our need out here in Southwest Virginia? And I know that this is probably all foreign to you. Javion knows all about it, but most times we're just not even on the map as far as candidates, focusing on our relationships, canvassing. So to hear what you just said, Lenny, that they're going to do a coordinated campaign here in Blacksburg blows my mind. This is really good. I mean, that's all good stuff. So kudos to them. And thank you, because you made it happen, working so hard and getting, what was 100? It was like crazy, 183 or something.
Exactly, 183 was what we lost by. So we're going to pull it through this year. But
it'll be flipped this year. And it was because of your hard work. And also kudos for running again, because a lot of times women do not run again. Look at Sam, one of our favorites. Sam ran how many times? 3 or 4 times before he was elected to anything. But women run one time or anything. Forget that. I'm not going through that anymore. So kudos to you, Larry. Here's my next question. What role can churches, nonprofits, and schools play in civic education? Not getting out the vote, just educating them. What roles can they play? Does anybody jump in?
Okay, I'll go first. So
Leslie.
I feel as though, specifically when it comes to churches, I feel like a lot of churches do not want to be political because they don't want to drive people away from coming to church, and they don't want to make church political. But I feel as though so many laws and, policies and things that this country has kind of built off of is religion, is stuff that comes from the Bible, is stuff that comes from Christianity. So I just feel as though churches getting involved in politics shouldn't be as taboo as it is. And I feel like they could definitely play a bigger role because they do have a really big pull on the community. It's where everybody comes together and gets to know each other and fellowships. So talking about what's happening in our communities, talking about what's happening even just like in the world, in our nation, and introducing candidates or just having opportunities for them to get to know candidates after service, or just having them come speak and things like that. I feel like that's definitely a way that they could get more, churches specifically could get more involved. And then when it comes to schools and stuff, I would say the same thing, inviting candidates to come visit, not waiting for them to reach out to you and say, "Oh, can you come to the school?" But like asking them, like, "Oh, I know there's a race going on right now. Do you want to come and talk to our students because we want to encourage them to vote?" And so I feel like those are some ways that they could probably increase voter turnout.
Very, very good point, valid point. You know, that during the civil rights movement, you know who was behind that? The churches. It was the churches, and they made some stuff happen. So I put that question out there because churches are not as involved currently as they used to be, but really they did make a lot of stuff happen. And so if it weren't for them, we wouldn't be where we are now. And it would be really good if we could re-engage them. So anybody else have any thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're talking about building and connecting and like having relationships with folks. Those relationships are built off of personal stories and shared values. And I think church is a great place where people come together on shared values. And so not being afraid of living your faith at the polling place, I think is something that we can kind of let Democrats know in Southwest Virginia. It's okay. It's okay to take your Bible and your brain with you when you go to vote because your shared values matter. And a lot of people's values are built off of their faith structure in their church and their community. And I think voter registration, and I'm just going to beat this horse as much as I can, but voter registration is huge. So having like churches are a great place where people come pretty consistently, and it's a good place for people to get information. So having voter registration drives and then just letting people know when things are coming out, and then letting people start to have a different kind of relationship with policy. And what does this mean? When we go to church and we read our Bibles and sing out of the hymnal, are we really enacting those same values and those same principles when it comes to our policy? And that's something that I think candidates can be also engaging in a little bit more.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on that? You know, I know a lot of the candidates show up at church and they stay 10 minutes and they leave. Trust me, the church members certainly don't appreciate that. No, nobody likes that. Nobody likes for somebody campaigning to come show up at their church, be introduced, and then next thing you know, they're out the door. So, Lily, what are your thoughts on what we could do and how would we do that? How would we engage the churches? I know that you're in full-fledged campaign mode right now. So tell me, what are your thoughts on involving the churches and the community?
Yeah, I like to let a lot of the folks, the churches that want to be involved, be engaged and in supporting their efforts. You know, I don't want to push this into any specific spot. And so a lot of what I do in that realm, and maybe I should be doing more of this, is if there's a church that's really wanting to be engaged, and then going and speaking with the membership if they are interested and that kind of thing, and then getting them involved in the campaign and bringing them out. I know that we have a lot of groups locally that do a lot of this outreach already. And so we also let them lean in on that part. And then just knowing that they have a leader that is going to be supporting them and making sure that they have the resources that they need, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's no easy answer. I just know that it's something that has to be done. It's really important right now. And I'm just trying to talk through it and you know, just start thinking about what caused this apathy and what can we do to try to re-engage people. It's just so important. But
Hey, Trish, I want to jump in on this one right
yeah,
quick
go
before
ahead,
you move
Junia.
on. Also, it's also good to educate and tell them there's a difference between civic engagement and partisanship. You don't have to be supporting a certain candidate, putting it in your sermons, but it's okay to hold a voter drive out after church or before church to get people registered to vote. It's okay to invite candidates in to speak. Just don't be, oh, I'm only inviting the Republican, or I'm only inviting the Democrat, or I'm only inviting certain candidates. You have to be open to being nonpartisan. So, yeah, there's a difference between civic engagement and partisanship there.
Since you said that, I'm sitting here thinking, do you think it might be helpful if we were to get a lot of the pastors from a lot of the different churches together and have someone kind of do that training from the state's perspective, I guess, from the electoral board, to let them know what the limits are, what they can and cannot do? Because I think I agree with you on that. I think a lot of the pastors are just afraid to, because they are nonprofits, some of them 501c3s. They don't want to get in any kind of trouble engaging, but it's two different things as far as civic engagement. and endorsing a candidate. So maybe we need to get them together and do some sort of training. What do you think about that? What are your thoughts on that, guys?
Yeah, I think, well, just not for the churches too, our universities too, because they're also scared of the way people that control their funding. And you're supporting this candidate, but I'm the incumbent Republican in this super red district. I'm most likely going to get elected again. And you're only inviting the Democrat. So
Yeah.
it kind of plays the role there. I know our school is super particular. I'm the president of the Young Dems up here. Lena's on my e-board. I got in so much trouble when I invited
Yeah.
lieutenant governor candidates to come speak, because they say this needs to be ran up the chain, because we don't want it to look partisan.
Right.
We're only supporting Democrats. We're only supporting such and such, even though we really know who's for the HBCUs, but still.
So that makes a lot of sense. I mean, not just the schools, colleges, or the churches, but also the D9 organizations. All of us, are kind of reluctant. We invite certain people, and then they say, "Well, you can't endorse anybody else just at the national convention for Delta." You can help candidates. You can. Delta Sigma Theta cannot, but you can as an individual. And people have to understand that they are individuals and that they are representing themselves, not the organization. But there's so much that we've got to teach people and to help them to understand. But here, let me move on, because I don't want to get tied up and run out of time. But I want to know, what would you say to someone who said, "My vote does not count"? And I want to hear from every one of you. So please start off. Just tell me, what would you say to someone who said, "My vote does not count"? How do you respond?
I'm going to hit this one first. For my Roanoke people, look at the 2024 mayor race. That one was won by what? Just a little under 200 votes, under 100 votes?
Yes.
Yeah, a no-biter. It caused a recount and 30,000 votes over 30,000 votes that were cast. It caused a recount. My Tidewater people, look at the Norfolk election for the Commonwealth Attorney, this primary. Look at the city council race back in 2024. Bernie Sanders talks about his mayor race, how he won it by 1 vote. Just look at past elections and how close they got.
And how close?
Your vote definitely matters.
It definitely matters. Yeah, I lost that 47 votes the first time I ran for council. So, okay, Lena, what would you say to somebody? Then implicate them, and then you, Lily, close it out.
Well, I would say to that, if you don't do politics, politics is going to do you. You know what I mean? That's pretty much my response. It doesn't matter if you don't care, if you decide you're not going to go out and vote, it's going to affect you no matter what. Like, this isn't something that you can sweep under the rug. This is not only everybody else's life, but it's your life too. It doesn't just affect this group of people. It affects you too. And so you can't act like you don't care. It affects you and your future kids and in the next generation. It affects everybody. And just because you don't care doesn't mean and you don't vote, it doesn't mean it's not going to have any impact. It has impact. You voting and you not voting has an impact. And so just choose a pause. And that's pretty much what I would have to say about that. Even when you look at, the national election that happened not too long ago, there are a lot of people who either wish they voted or wish they voted differently. And it just goes to show how much your vote matters, because the nation, I don't want to say it's crumbling, but there's a lot going wrong. And there's a lot that is going on now that would not have been going on if more people voted, or if more people were educated on the candidates they were voting for. There were a lot of people that, use the excuse of, well, I don't like either candidate. But now we see what's happening because you didn't vote. You know what I mean? And so that's what I would have to say. Look at the state of our country now. Just because you're not voting doesn't mean you're not affected by everything that our president is doing.
Exactly. Emily Kate, what would you tell somebody who said, "My vote doesn't matter"?
Yeah, I would say, and we talked earlier about how Southwest Virginia has been marginalized, and we have to flip districts around here, which means we have to win in the margin. We exist in the margin, and we've got a lot of people who are on the fence. And so there will be pretty much a 50-50 split in terms of partisanship. But when it comes to who shows up and who turns out, that's where we can really affect elections. And so I think because this will be so close, because it will be in the margins, you cannot let yourself stand between your ability to have good representation in Richmond.
Yeah.
You cannot stand between you and your community's ability to have a responsive leader. In 2017, Shelley Simmons in Newport News, her race was a tie. We used this in Arizona in 2018. We talked about this all the time. She lost because they drew her opponent's name out of the hat.
That's insane. That is insane.
It was insane. Out of like 70 different organizers we had in Arizona, I was the one from Virginia. Every time that story came up, everyone would turn around and look at me and say, I had nothing to do with it.
That was insane. That's how we elected.
I had a conversation with her on Saturday, and we talked a little bit about that. And I was like, we talked about you a lot in Arizona. And she said that she would go up to people's doors and even she was knocking for 10K and afterwards had a conversation. And someone was like, yeah, I don't know. I just don't really think I'm going to vote. And she said that was the first time in all of it where she kind of broke down and had to really like level with the fact that your vote does matter. And that person's vote could have been the person that sent her to Richmond. So don't let yourself be that vote. Don't let your friends be that vote. Friends don't let friends stay home on election day.
That's exactly right. Call all your friends on election day. Lily, what would you tell somebody? And you hear it all the time, I'm sure.
Oh, I do hear it all the time. And EK's story, I mean, that was the tie was what determined the majority party here in Virginia, too. So it's not even like one vote was what decided for the Republicans to be in control in Virginia, which is crazy to think about. I use that story a lot of times with folks, but I think at the end of the day, I tell people, not voting is a decision and you have to, and you talk to them what concerns them, what matters to them, and you really bring it back to the issues that are at hand in that at the local level or the state level, we can help your day-to-day lives. And this is where your vote matters the most. If you want to have a lower electric bill, if you want to have better access to broadband, if you want your kids to have good schools, like that vote happens at the state and local level. And so you have to show up to make sure that you're fighting for your family and fighting for your home. And I think that resonates a lot with people.
I agree. I know this is going to be a nail biter, and maybe it won't. Maybe it will be a blowout on one way or the other. But from what I'm hearing, I think it's going to be a nail biter, and every vote's going to count. So here, we're talking about Roanoke mostly because that's where I live. But are you hearing that people are having a hard time getting registered? Do you feel like there may be some voter suppression or people are not taking advantage of the early voting? Because what I am afraid of is that if you don't use it, you will lose it. Because I go to early vote the first day because it's just a big deal, right? I want to be one of the first ones. But do you know there's probably 3 people or maybe 10 that show up the entire day and maybe 200 the entire period? It's a long period in that. And we went from being one of the hardest states to vote in to one of the easiest. And I think some of those things that we are benefiting from and that has helped with our voting process is at stake because people are not taking advantage of it. Do you think there's the precincts changing, or do you think there's a reason why people are not taking advantage of the early voting and the registration?
Sometimes it takes a little bit for people to trust something. Like new processes usually take a little bit to shake out. I know a lot of people who like to wait until the end. They're like, I don't really know what's going to happen. I don't want to regret the vote that I take. And this is kind of where we have to live it back into shared values. If you're confident in who your candidate is, then that shouldn't be a problem. But I do think it will take a little bit of time coming around to it. But I think also it takes all of the campaign and coordinated efforts talking about early vote, talking about the importance of it. And then I used to always when you make a plan to vote with someone at the doors, I'd always have them kind of visualize their day. And a lot of times we find out someone, oh, my kid has an away soccer game, so we're going to be out of town that evening and I won't be able to go vote. And I think another thing to remember is that people have, and maybe for now, people have some federally protected time to vote. So even if they need to leave work to go vote, that's a protected option. I'm not sure if it's early vote, but I know on election day that you're permitted to leave work to vote. So I think just being able to message things like that and then work really hard to find people who are able to get to the polls, talk about absentee voting, talk about how they can track their ballot, they can see when it's accepted, And then I think just consistency and working with voters through that process is something that will help get folks a little more comfortable using the new systems.
So my final remark, it's not a question, it's for you. Just tell me, what do you think we can do, or what do you think needs to be done for this upcoming election to make sure that we have some increase in our turnout? Make sure that we are turning every stone, knocking every door. Tell me, what do you think can be done for anybody listening right now? What should we be doing to engage more voters? Because this is going to be a very important election. The next presidential election is going to be very important. So what can we do for those non-voters, the people who've not even registered, who doesn't care to register? There are some people who don't even want to register. What would you say to that person? I'll give each one of you a try at it and then end our podcast.
I would say, look at the past couple of months. If that's not motivation enough for you to go and vote whenever the polls open, I don't know what else to tell you. Because right now there's a saying, I won't say it because it's really explicit, but mess around and find out. We're in the find out phase.
We're going to find out. All right. Come on. What do you say, Lily?
I would just say that, if you're people need to get involved and get engaged. And so if you are wanting to help get out the vote this year, get involved. There's going to be a campaign in every zip code of Virginia this year. And so make sure you're getting engaged and telling your friends and neighbors that they need to get out and vote this year and why it's so important, because you have more power over the community that you're in. And so make sure that you're getting all your friends and your family out and getting folks registered and let them know of the issues. That aunt or uncle that voted for Donald Trump, it's your job to get them to come around. It's not going to be some random volunteer that stops on the door. It's going to be somebody that knows them and knows their lifestyle. And so it's time to have those tough conversations with our friends and family and be like, hey, your vote affected me and it's affecting our family, and talking to them about why it's so important that they get engaged, and maybe flipping some folks too.
Yes, you as well, Emily Kate. I agree with you on that one, Lily. And Emily Kate, I wanted some younger people on, because I think we're having an issue with some of the younger people. They're the ones who are, if they get excited about something, they will show up. Look what they did for President Obama. It was pouring rain down in Tidewater. They were showing the lines just out the building where people stood there. They were excited. They were going to do it. Tell us, how can we get back to that, Emily Kate? What can we do to bring those days back?
I think a lot of it just has to do with candidates being relatable. Like, I'll brag on Lily again. She's been doing a really good job about this. It's like whenever she shows up to an event, all of the young Dems are like, oh my gosh, Lily's here. Let's go talk to her. I remember we were at a retreat and there was like a little weird scavenger hunt, I guess, side mission that we were thinking about. And then someone found out that Lily was going. And then turns out like 30 people all went because they found out Lily was going. So being captivating, being relatable, and then putting in the work, it shows. Lily is on the doors and you can hear it in her messaging, because her messaging is not always the same. She's adaptable. And I think that's really important to have in a candidate, is someone who takes feedback and also is able to put in the hard work. And I think when you see people putting in the hard work and also turning out other folks to do that volunteer work, then that's when you kind of really captivate an audience. For Obama organizing the rule ones, they come for the candidate, but they stay for the organizer. And I think that's really true. I also want to brag on the Spamberger team. They've been doing a phenomenal job coordinating, especially down ballot. And Virginia is weird because of our coordination law, but I haven't seen this level of support for legislative candidates yet. And so it's really, really hopeful for me. And I think that Spamberger has done a really good job in hiring. I've been super, super impressed with the staff that they have here and the dedication that they're putting in, not only to the top of ticket, but to all of the local races as well. So I think knocking on doors, it truly is the only way. Face-to-face conversations with voters, only way to move people on the margins. And we are fighting a race in the margins.
Thank you, Emily Kate, for that. I totally agree with you on that. And, I'm sitting here thinking, Lena, I'm going to ask you something differently. What can we do to get young people to volunteer or to even work on campaigns to help with the grassroots efforts? Because that's what it's all about. It really comes down to grassroots. I didn't get involved until the hanging chads. Y'all are too young for that. But that was when Florida, woke up the next morning, still didn't have a president. I think 2 months later, because the machines didn't punch the circle all the way through. So they had to count each one by hand to see if it was perforated through that little hole. And they call it a hanging chad. And Al Gore lost that election to Bush because of the hanging chads. And the next year, or the next election, I said, you know what, I'm going to get involved. So I've been involved ever since. I always tell that story, like the hanging chads got me motivated, but it made a difference. Knocking on doors, look what we did when we got involved in the grassroots level for President Obama. What can we do to get young people off of the iPhones and the internet and social media, and to get them to be motivated enough to knock on doors for a candidate? What would you say?
If I can be 100% real, incentivize it. You gotta pay
You
them.
gotta stay young people there.
If they're college students, a broke college student, even if they're not passionate about it, they'll make themselves passionate. I feel like it's just something that you will go out your way to make the money. Yeah, like you will educate yourself if it means you're making a little bit of money on the side. And so I feel like these campaigns, if they have like more money that they could put aside for college students if they want to come out and help with campaign,
They got it.
They got it. I feel like if I can be 100% real and like if I could, put all the, if they could find it in their heart stuff aside, I feel like anything monetary or anything incentivized, that would do the best at getting everybody out.
I'm gonna close on that. I appreciate it. I appreciate your honesty and being candid with us, Lena.
We're in a Trump's economy, Trish. We're in a Trump economy.
We're in a economy. We got to pay the people. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I'm still stuck in the old days. Oh, let's go volunteer. All my friends get our little Coca-Colas and go knock doors. No more, right? That's a.
I'll say there is a wealth of retired folks who are willing to put as much time and effort into it as they can. And so what I always say is having a young person that you pay to organize the retired folks is how will help you so much. So you have someone who's young with the energy, who knows everything, who can be compliant, who can work a Google Sheet, who can work email, work the phone banks, but then have them talk to the retired folks who've got a lot of time to spend on this. It's a great relationship. They love seeing young kids out working hard. And it takes a lot of effort off of the campaign when you have kind of organically led volunteer movements.
All right, we're going to close with that because I want to get into the old people, because I know some old people who cannot knock doors anymore. They knocked all the doors they want to knock. But that's a good point. Thank you all for joining me today. And we may bring you back before the election because we got to figure this thing out, right? November 2025 is going to say a lot. And Virginia and New Jersey will be speaking for the entire country. If you don't realize that, we are going to send a message to this entire country. So come on, Virginia, come on, New Jersey. Let's see what we can do and get ready for this election. Thank you guys for coming on. Until next time, we'll see you. And don't forget to share this podcast with your friends. Ask them to follow, hit the like button. Check out the rest of them. We're going to be diving deep into this political scene. Thank you.